So you got a Cricut for Christmas and you might feel a little overwhelmed. You might feel a little like, where do I start? And if you are in that boat, this video is for you. So for starters, my name is Laura. This is the Design Bundles YouTube channel. We are here for you as you start your Cricut crafting journey. I personally have been crafting with a Cricut for about 5 years consistently, but I've been using Cricut products since I was in college. It is so normal to feel overwhelmed at first. I remember when I started with my Cricut, I was completely overwhelmed with all just the jargon and the terms and what I could cut with and what blades to use and when to mirror and when not to mirror and how to apply the products. I just had no clue, and I ended up searching so much online and reading endless blog posts to learn what to do. And I really longed for a place where it was just all in one place, where I could learn what I needed to learn step by step. So we are creating this series just for you. It's the Cricut Beginner Series, and it starts today, right here, right now. So this video's focus is really just to get you familiar with some practical tips, tricks, and terminology as you start your Cricut journey. I think even just understanding what everything is was so overwhelming to me at first, so we've decided that is the best place to start you. So that's where we're gonna begin today. We're gonna go through all that stuff, and then in future videos, we're gonna do your first heat transfer vinyl project, your first print then cut project, your first adhesive vinyl project, and we're gonna get you well on your way to being a Cricut pro. Okay, so first things first, what even is a Cricut? Well, a Cricut is just a computerized cutting machine. So it's just a tool to help us cut materials that we technically could cut by hand, but don't want to. The biggest Cricut is the Cricut Maker. Well, actually, no, not anymore. Hold on. The biggest Cricut used to be the Cricut Maker 3, and that is this Cricut right here. It is a powerhouse, and it is really good for cutting thicker materials. You can cut wood with this bad boy, you can cut fabric, and all the materials you can cut with the rest of the Cricut line. A level below this one is the Cricut Explore series, and this is a really great Cricut for 99% of crafters. It can cut almost everything that Cricuts can cut, with the exception of some kinds of wood and some kinds of fabric. So it's really a mid-range Cricut, and it's good for most users. The baby of the Cricut family is the Cricut Joy and the Cricut Joy Extra. This is the Cricut Joy Extra. It is mighty but small and can cut just a smaller range of projects, and it cuts at a smaller size. You can see that the width available to cut here is just a little bit smaller than a normal Cricut. The newest Cricut to join the family is the Cricut Venture, which I don't have to show you, but it is massive, it's huge, and it can cut really big scale projects and big repeats of projects. So if you like to make oversized things, that may be one to look into. Or if you are a business owner who uses your Cricut for that, you may look into the Cricut Venture. All Cricuts can cut adhesive vinyl, heat transfer vinyl, paper, cardstock, and honestly hundreds of materials. I highly recommend checking out the Cricut website to see what all your Cricut can do. You'll be amazed at all the things you can cut with your Cricut. It's so much fun. So when we're talking about materials you can cut with a Cricut, let's just give a brief overview. First is everyday materials, and those are things you're gonna cut most often with any Cricut machine. That would be adhesive vinyl, permanent and removable are the two types, cardstock and paper, heat transfer vinyls, which are your iron-ons, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and specialty types of paper like sticker paper. Then there are specialty materials, which can be cut with most Cricut machines, but you're gonna need to check the compatibility for your specific one. And those are items like leather, acetate, chipboard, and balsa wood. When you're going to cut a new material, here are my quick tips for you. Number one is check the recommended settings for that specific item. So in Cricut Design Space, which we'll look at in a little bit, you can select the item that you're gonna cut, and it's gonna give you a recommended cut setting and a recommended blade to cut that item. Definitely follow through with those. Don't try to just stray off the beaten path, because you could really hurt your blade or you could really destroy the material. The next thing is always do a test cut. If you're cutting something you've never cut before, I highly recommend just cutting like a little square or a little circle in the corner of your material to make sure that it cuts using the cut settings you've applied, and then go on to cutting your entire project. And last but not least, make sure you check the compatible tools for that material before cutting. For instance, most fabric is recommended to be cut with a rotary blade, whereas some types of wood are recommended to be cut with a deep cut blade. And this makes a huge difference, not only in the quality of your product, but also in the longevity of your machine, in the longevity of your tools, etc., etc. So make sure you do those things before you cut something new. Okay, let's get into terminology 101. These are the things you're gonna hear people say all the time when they're talking about crafting with a Cricut, and you may be sitting there going, what is that? So the first is a mat, and the mat is just the sticky thing that holds your material onto the mat so you can actually cut it with your machine. And mats come in all shapes and sizes, and they differ based off what material you're going to be cutting. The one that I would recommend making sure you have plenty of is the standard grip mat, and it's generally green, and it is, as you would suspect, standard grip. It's medium stickiness. Now this is the mat size, the standard mat size for the Maker and the Explorers, but the Joy has a skinnier mat, so make sure you get the right size mat for your machine as well. There's also fabric grip mats. They are typically pink. This one needs to be cleaned. And there's also strong grip mats that are generally purple and light grip mats that are generally blue. You wanna make sure you have a variety depending on what you're gonna be cutting, but if you're really gonna stick to cutting like adhesive vinyl and cardstock, you can probably just get a few regular grip mats to get you started. If you wanna cut paper, definitely get a light grip mat, and if you wanna cut a lot of fabric, get you a fabric grip mat. To put it in perspective, I have been cutting for years, and I don't even think I have a strong grip mat, but if you're gonna be cutting a lot of wood, you may wanna head in that direction. You may hear people talk about weeding, and you might be thinking, what is weeding? And weeding is just removing the excess material that's stuck on your mat after you do your cut. So when you cut with your Cricut, it's gonna cut out the design, and then you have to weed away the excess material to leave behind your pretty design that you just made. So when people talk about weeding, they're usually using a weeding tool. They look like this or this. They can be slightly different shape at the hook, and that just really is personal preference. I haven't really found a massive difference in them. I tend to like the bigger hook like this. I think it's a little bit easier for beginners to use. The ones that look more like this, that have like kind of a, I don't know, rectangular hook, I think they're a little harder to use when you get started, but you can get these a little bit more cheap. So keep that in mind. Okay, transfer tape. You might have heard people talk about transfer tape. All transfer tape is contact paper. It's just fancy contact paper for Cricuts. And that would be if you make a design with adhesive vinyl and you cut it and it's on your mat, and you might be staring at it thinking, okay, well, it's in like 100 pieces. How do I get it to my final product? How do I put it on my cup or put it on my keychain? Transfer tape. You just peel away your transfer tape, place it on your design, press it down, pick it up, put it on your product. So it seems really complicated. It's really not that complicated. And if you stick with me through this beginner series, we will do a project where we use transfer tape, and I'll show you in a little bit more detail how to use it. But when you hear people talk about transfer tape, this is what they're talking about. Burnishing. You might have heard people talk about burnishing. It sounds like a complicated term for something that's really not that complicated. It's just using a scraper to flatten things down so they don't have air bubbles when we are laying things down on our mat or putting it on our final product. That's really it with burnishing. Another thing you might have heard people talk about that you might be curious about are smart materials. Smart materials are really cool. They're made by Cricut, and they are a specific type of vinyl that is created where you don't have to use a mat to cut it, which is really nice because using a mat can be tedious, especially if you're cutting something that's really long or if you're cutting something that you want to make like 100 copies of. So when you use smart materials, it's really cool because you can just put the whole roll of vinyl here and let it feed through, which is really convenient. We talked about the different types of Cricut mats earlier on, but let's run through them again really fast. There's regular grip, which is green. You're gonna use it like 90% of the time for most materials that you use, like vinyl, adhesive vinyl, heat transfer vinyl, cardstock. The second kind is light grip. It's typically blue, and you're gonna use that for things like paper, really thin cardstock, really thin types of vinyl sometimes, but that's pretty much it. Strong grip mats are typically purple, and you're gonna use that for things like wood or really thick vinyl, but mostly wood. And then you have fabric grip mats, which are specialty mats, and they're typically pink, and you're gonna use those for fabric. Yeah, just fabric. When you're cutting fabric, you'll be using a rotary blade. So let's get into talking about the different types of blades. A quick tip about mats before we move on, because I almost forgot, you can clean your Cricut mats. So That might come as a surprise to you if you looked at the shape of the Cricut mats I just showed you, but yes, you can clean Cricut mats. You can just use some Dawn dish soap and a scrubber that you don't want to use on food and just scrub away all that debris, wash it with some Dawn dish soap, and then leave it out back to dry, and that thing will become sticky again. There are some products out there that people try to sell where you can spray it on your mat and it makes it sticky again. I don't find that that works very well, and I actually think it's more of a hassle than it's worth. I found that if I just clean it really well with Dawn dish soap and leave it out to dry and just dab it a little bit dry with a paper towel before leaving it to dry totally outside, the stickiness kind of comes back on its own. Some people also swear by using baby wipes to remove debris from their mats. I have not tried that yet, so if you've tried it, let me know in the comments below. But some people say it works really well, so I say give it a go. Okay, we said we would talk about the different types of blades, so we're gonna talk about that, and I'm even gonna show you how to swap out the blades on your Cricut. The most common blade and the one that's included with all of your machines is your fine point blade. So that's the one that you're gonna see that's already in your Cricut, and that's what you're gonna use to cut almost everything. You can cut a lot of things with the fine point blade, and you're gonna find that you use it 99% of the time. There's also a deep point blade. I don't have one to show you, but the deep point blade can cut through wood and really thick kinds of foam. The rotary blade is for the Maker only. It's not compatible with the Explorer or the Joy, but the rotary blade is great for cutting fabric. I do use it a lot, so if you feel like you're gonna cut fabric, I do think the Maker is the right call for you. I have one to show you. This is your rotary blade. And I will show you how to change a blade really quick, and we'll put this one on. And while I do that, I'll talk to you about the knife blade, which is for really heavy duty materials like wood, and it's also compatible only with the Maker. So you have this clamp right here. You can actually have two tools at one time in most machines, like the Explorer and the Maker. So if I wanted to put like a pen in, this is the pen holder, so. Because even though I said that your Cricut is a cutting machine, it's also a drawing machine, which is really cool. You can get fabric pens, you can get infusible ink pens, which allow you to actually press directly onto clothing or tote bags. And you can just get general pens and markers that make card making really fun. And all of those things would go in clamp A. But clamp B is for cutting tools. So let's put our rotary blade in. We're gonna open the clamp, pop our blade out there, put our new blade in. I'm just lining up the like little rotary part. You don't have to worry about that if you're not using a rotary blade. But because I am, I want to get that lined up really good. Close my clamp. That's it. That's how you change out the blades. It's really, really easy. So let's change back by opening, taking it out, taking our little blade right here, dropping it in, and closing it. And that's it. Additionally, you can sharpen your blade. So if your fine point blade is getting a little bit dull, you're finding it's not cutting through things as well, you can sharpen it with aluminum foil by just wadding up some aluminum foil, taking the blade out how we just did, stabbing it a few times into the aluminum foil to sharpen it up, and then replacing it safely into your Cricut housing. Easy. Okay, next I want to talk about types of vinyl and how to cut them, because this truly was one of the most confusing things for me when I started with my Cricut. So let's do a brief overview, knowing that there are some exceptions to the rule, but you'll get the overall gist of it. So first is adhesive vinyl. Adhesive vinyl is sticky, and it's what you would use on cups. It's what you would use on hard surfaces because it's like a permanent sticker. You can tell that it's adhesive vinyl and not heat transfer vinyl because when you open it up, it has this adhesive backing. It's got like, it looks like a sticker. And there's really two different kinds of adhesive vinyl, permanent and removable. And that's easy to remember because one's permanent and one's removable. So use it for the right projects accordingly. I have definitely put permanent vinyl on a temporary surface before and regretted it. So make sure you label your vinyls as to whether they are permanent or temporary. Most of them will say on the backing that I just showed you, but if they don't, when you're storing them after you take it out of its original packaging, I use slap bracelets to store mine, and you could just take a Sharpie and put a T or an R. So that way, T or an R, that would be temporary and removable. Put a R or a P or a T, or however you want to label it. Label it however you want, it doesn't matter. but make sure you know it's permanent or temporary. Additionally, adhesive vinyl is what you're gonna use transfer tape with because it has that sticky backing. So you'll cut it and then you'll need a way to lift it and place it on whatever you're putting it on. So adhesive vinyl and transfer tape go hand in hand, they go together. The next type of vinyl is heat transfer vinyl, and you do not need transfer tape for heat transfer vinyl. It actually has its own transfer tape attached that's not really sticky. I mean, it's a little bit sticky, but not really. You can tell that it's heat transfer vinyl because when I open it up, it doesn't have that sticker on the back. It's not sticky in and of itself, and that's because heat transfer vinyl is put on fabrics and porous surfaces with heat. It's applied with heat. And because of that, we're able to cut it with our Cricut and then put it on whatever project we're gonna put it on and then heat it up with a heat press, and it's going to adhere in that manner. So instead of using adhesive to stick, it's using heat to stick, hence the difference in the names. This is regular old heat transfer vinyl in this very bright pink. And then there's a specialty kind of heat transfer vinyl that you're gonna come across a lot, glitter heat transfer vinyl. The only difference really is that it's thicker, but it's used the same way, it's just glittery. There are lots of other kinds of specialty vinyl like holographic vinyl, holographic heat transfer vinyl, and just so many. Brick heat transfer vinyl is like really, really thick. Strip flock heat transfer vinyl is kind of fuzzy and almost a little bit velvety. Puff heat transfer vinyl puffs up when you heat it and creates a 3D effect. There are so many really cool specialty vinyls out there, but in general, your basics are regular adhesive, permanent or temporary, and regular heat transfer vinyl, regular or glitter. Now, the one thing that used to get me so tripped up is to mirror or not to mirror. And you might have already heard this terminology, but basically that just means before I cut it, do I need to flip my design horizontally or not? And it used to be so confusing to me to remember, but your general rule of thumb, and yes, there are exceptions to this rule, but 99% of the time, if it's adhesive vinyl, you don't mirror. If it's heat transfer vinyl, you do. Now, if you wanna know the nitty-gritty on why, I'll tell you in the next like 30 seconds. And if you don't care about it, just skip ahead past 30 seconds and then you don't have to listen to it. But the reason why is because this has a backing already on it. So when we adhere it, we're just gonna be lifting and placing. So there's really no need to mirror our design. But with heat transfer vinyl, because there is no backing and it has its own carrier sheet, I'm gonna have to cut it upside down because the carrier sheet is on this side. So because I'm cutting it upside down, when I place it on my design, instead of doing this, I have to do this to place it on my design. So because of that, we mirror. So heat transfer vinyl, you always mirror. Adhesive vinyl, you don't. Now, like I said, there's exceptions to the rule, and knowing why we mirror will really help you with those exceptions to the rule, because if you ever use a heat transfer vinyl that does require transfer tape because of its specialty nature, then you're gonna know, oh, that means I don't have to mirror because I'll be lifting and placing. So, hope that helps. And that is a brief overview on different types of vinyl. Okay, so a few maintenance tips for our dear old Cricut, because these things do get dirty and mine currently is dirty. Make sure you wipe down the exterior. You can do that with like a gentle cleaner or just with a wet paper towel or even with a baby wipe. You can use compressed air to clean inside the machine if things really get clogged up. And you can use a baby wipe to wipe down the rails as well, which I do. A few last tips as we end this video, and I'll tell you what is to come in this Cricut beginner series. I would recommend starting with some pre-made designs in Cricut Design Space or utilizing an easy design from design bundles that you can download to do your first projects, because it can be really hard to make a big custom project at first. I would recommend starting with something simple and starting with a simple material like adhesive vinyl or heat transfer vinyl. If you stick with us in the series, I will do a beginner adhesive vinyl project with you and a beginner heat transfer vinyl project with you, so have no fear. If you're having trouble finding designs, stick with me and we will walk you through it. My second recommendation is to invest in like a basic toolkit. Cricut makes a really good one. There's also several really good ones on Amazon. I bought the Cricut one at first. I don't regret it for a single second. It includes everything you need, like a weeding tool, a scraper, and some scissors. it's a really good way to get going and to know that you have everything you need, so you're not in the middle of a project one day and realize you're missing something. My other big tip is to keep scraps. If you do a project on a piece of vinyl and you have like a couple inches of it left, cut it and find a good way to store it. I use little scrapbooking boxes to store my scraps. You will want them one day. They come in handy, and lots of projects just require little pieces of vinyl, and it will save you so much money in the long run if you save those scraps. Okay, really quickly, next up in the series, in the next video, I'm gonna do a big Cricut Design Space overview, show you how to use all the tools in Cricut Design Space, and we're even gonna kind of design our first project so you get really familiar with all of the buttons and tools that are in that software. The next video will be your first adhesive vinyl project. The video after that will be your first heat transfer vinyl project. And then the video after that will be your first print then cut project, and we're gonna make some stickers. So I really hope you stick with us, and I hope you loved this video. Definitely save it for future use because you will wanna refer back to it later as you're getting started. In the beginning, learning how to do your Cricut can be like a fire hose to the face, but we are here with you every step of the way. So save this video so you can come back to it. Share it with a friend who might be starting on their Cricut journey, and leave us some comments below on what you want to learn in future installments of this series so we can make sure to include it for you. Again, my name is Laura, and this has been the Design Bundles YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and we will see you back here next time for beginner Cricut Design Space tips.